Our next guest may come from a famous family, but that's not why we are happy to have him as part of our own American Legion family. A Navy SEAL veteran who served 2 tours in Vietnam, he is an avid conservationist and patriot. He is a highly successful investment banker and the 2018 recipient of the Past Department Commanders Club James V. Day Good Guy Award. He's the managing director at Barclays Capital Corporation and also the chairman of the American Legion 100th Anniversary Observance Honorary Committee. From the Department of New York, please welcome Theodore Roosevelt IV.
Great to be here. National Commander, thank you for that kind introduction, which was as unwarranted as it was generous, and for inviting me to be part of the 100th anniversary celebration of the American Legion. I am deeply honored to be here with you today. And I want to give you personally special congratulations and also to your formidable staff here in Indiana and to all of the volunteers, to all of you who embody the spirit of service, duty, and comradeship upon which the Legion was founded. And I also want to personally thank you for being so flexible, allowing me to accept an important conservation assignment going down the middle fork of the Salmon River in Idaho. And I also, one of the things I learned as being part of the Centennial Committee is that if one young lady, Lori Finley Jackson, asks you to do something, there's only one answer. Click your heels and say, "Yes, ma'am." My grandfather, Ted Roosevelt Jr., often said, "No one man can claim to be the founder of the American Legion." In fact, I doubt if the Legion would have endured if it was simply the realization of one man's efforts. It was not that. The Legion was an idea and an ideal that resonated with all of those who served in World War I. It is the expression of their deep comradeship, their sense of duty and honor. Grandfather often told the story of the man who inspired the Legion. He met him at a hospital camp in France. Grandfather was recovering there from a gunshot wound to his leg. Sergeant William Patterson was near the end of his own recovery from a combat wound. The two men talked under a shade tree in France. In the midst of war, they talked. Always deeply interested in his fellow soldiers, Grandfather asked the sergeant what he intended to do when he got home. Sergeant Patterson answered, "Go home, sir, and start a veterans association for the good of the country." Sergeant Patterson never made it home. He was killed in action, but the returning soldiers, sailors, and Marines all rallied around this idea to do what was needed for our veterans and for the good of the country on the home front. And that is what today is all about. All of you, this community and communities across our nation that share this goal, the good of our veterans, the good of our country. A country that, with 2 fateful exceptions, never sought out international conflict, but will rise with a mighty roar when conflict finds it. A country that is about nothing so much as a tough, pragmatic idealism. Valor that does not require medals, but does require all of us to rise to the occasions before us. And all of you here today do that. Rise to the occasion. You know what it takes. That is why I've been so pleased to participate in the American Legion's 100th anniversary celebrations. I suspect that Grandfather would not be surprised in the least at the endurance of this organization, founded as it is on a fundamental principle: a veteran is a veteran. Ted Jr. only saw the soldier, nothing else, because nothing else mattered, not race, rank, or duty station, not social position, education, or money. The only things that mattered then and now: service, comradeship, loyalty. For grandfather and all the founders, this was clear. Those who gave all deserved all in return. One of my grandfather's favorite heroes in World War I was William Henry Johnson. His story is a perfect illustration of why we needed and continue to need the American Legion. Grandfather described William as one of the 5 bravest soldiers in the war. The Germans called him the Black Death. He fought with the 369th, or Harlem Hellfighters. It sounds a little like a Quentin Tarantino movie, but it was the real McCoy, real life, real men, veterans. That African-American unit spent 191 days in combat, more than any other outfit. They never lost a foot of ground or had any man taken as a prisoner. But it was the story of William Henry Johnson that stands as a sad and shameful warning of what the neglect of our soldiers can mean. Johnson was posted along with Needham Roberts at a listening point in no man's land, a treeless, barbed wire wasteland between enemy trenches. They were on lookout for enemy activity. Needham heard a click, click, click. Germans cutting through the wire, launching an assault. Early in the melee, Needham was badly injured, leaving William Henry Johnson to defend their post and his comrade. He killed 4 men in hand-to-combat using the butt of his jammed rifle and a knife. It is estimated that he withstood an assault of at least 30 men. The papers later wrote, "Germans ran shrieking into the night." Now that might have been a bit of propaganda. While both men received the Croix de Guerre from the French, our nation failed them. William Johnson only received a medal after his death. Even worse, he was badly injured in the battle, but the injury never made it into his military record. He had a silver plate in his foot and could no longer work as a porter as he'd done before the war. He died unacknowledged and penniless. The American Legion was founded and continues the hard fight to ensure this is not the story for returning veterans, that we do not forget their service or neglect their aid and comfort. Unfortunately, it remains an ongoing struggle that requires concrete and continuous action from all of us. Concrete action that does not falter, that does not waver, that is not the subject to the whims of politics. As you all know, the American Legion has given us the VA health system, recognition and treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder and illnesses caused by Agent Orange. Recently, I just lost one of my fellow officers in Vietnam from Agent Orange. So it's a tragedy that was needlessly inflicted on ourselves. It gave us a massive support network for needy families and children. It is important to remember that there was no VA when the American Legion was established. There was no GI Bill for education and career opportunities. Now, millions of veterans receive health care, home loans, education, and training through the VA. At any one time today, some 3,000 American Legion service officers are working on nearly 800,000 VA benefits cases free of charge. Millions of volunteer hours are being logged at VA healthcare facilities every year by the American Legion family. A healthy VA for the future must always be a priority for the American Legion, regardless of what century it is. Undoubtedly, we have many challenges before us, and among these, engaging with and connecting to the post-9/11 veterans. While as President Theodore Roosevelt firmly believed, military service is the great equalizer. While it unites all of us in what we share, it is also painfully unique to each of us. As you heard, I'm a Vietnam War vet. What is specific to that conflict unites me with most of the men and women who also served there, the terrain in which we fought, the jungles of Southeast Asia, the politics on the home front, the first televised conflict, Agent Orange, the bitter return for so many of us who were ignored or reviled. We seemed to speak our own language then. It was in the music we listened to, the particular guns we carried, unfortunately for many, the drugs to which they resorted. It felt as though our DNA was changed in ways that only non-veterans understood. Other vets from other generations were our comrades, but we needed acknowledgement of what was specific to Vietnam, what was left behind there, what remained an obstacle to a healthy return for so many. Much of that fight for acknowledgement was still being waged on the home front as recently as the struggle of Diane Carcel Evans, a combat nurse in Vietnam, who fought for almost a decade for a monument on the Mall in D.C. for the 11,000 women who served there, a monument that was finally dedicated in 1993. The American Legion, I am immensely proud to say, was a critical part of that effort. I cannot pretend to understand the specific challenges of our veterans of more recent conflicts, from Somalia to Bosnia to Afghanistan and Iraq. We know many of them, and we are continuing to learn. On the home front, there are traumatic brain injuries, depression and suicide that results, amputations, opioid addiction, and MST. Our rural veterans are additionally suffering from the dearth of healthcare availability and increasing isolation in rural areas. This is a large-scale social challenge, the rural-urban divide, but it is having an additional negative impact on our veterans. We cannot allow what is similar for our veterans to obscure what is unique to each conflict, each branch of the service, each generation. Engagement with the newest generation of veterans, communicating across generational lines, across technologies, across cultures, is essential. Honoring our history should not be an impediment to speaking to our present and future vets. In fact, honoring our history requires that we stretch, adjust, and do what it takes to stay on mission. We can't understand younger vets unless we are hearing directly from them, and that means that their generation needs leadership roles in the American Legion. Another challenge is the utilization of social media. Believe me, that is almost insurmountable for myself. Fortunately, the Legion has established a 21st century task force to guide us, and is being led by the newest and youngest generation of veterans. We are also building our partnership with a host of organizations founded by this generations. Student Veterans of America, their leader Jared is here today. Red, White, and Blue, Team Rubicon, and others. Together, we will rise to this occasion as well. I have full faith in the timeless foundation that was laid by those who returned from World War I and by each subsequent generation of the Legion. The mortar of this association is our devotion to one another. It is the gift of the American Legion. Our mission belongs to neither party and to no ambition than memory and duty. The American Legion founders believed that mission came ahead of party politics, and this has allowed us to be intimately woven into the fabric of this nation through rural and urban landscapes. Across our country, there are American Legion posts and volunteers, your neighbors and mine, coming together to meet the needs of their veterans and their communities. While there are still local newspapers, there are American Legion stories. Post 64 sends 4 local residents to State Trooper Training Program. Salisbury to host American Legion Baseball State Championship. American Legion hosts sock drive for combat troops. Famously, in 1835, Alexis de Tocqueville wrote this about America. Americans of all ages, all conditions, all minds constantly unite. Everywhere that, at the head of a new undertaking, you would see the government in France or a great lord in England, count on it that you will see an association of citizens in the United States. This is the practice of democracy, the free association of like-minded to advance a shared cause. And there are few causes as great as ours. But we are also all soldiers. We know the cost of a lack of discipline. We know what it takes to storm the hill or hold the bridge. We know what it takes to get it done. And so we did. And so we will continue to do, because we must. We have the American Legion because the World War I doughboys and doughgirls came home from war and remembered. They remembered their comrades in arms so well, they have shielded, comforted, and lifted up more generations than they ever knew. We are the children whom most of those soldiers never met. I never met my grandfather. We are their legacy, but it is not just about those bonds to grandfathers. It is about the obligations we must feel to grandsons, even those whom we may never meet. Together, we struggle to ensure that a William Henry Johnson will never again be abandoned. Today, we honor our mutual resolve, our comradeship, our loyalty to one another and to this great nation. Thank you.